So I want you to just take a second and imagine a mountain.
Okay.
Like just picture a massive mountain sitting there, totally immovable for, I don't know, 50 million years.
Right. Just existing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for every single second of its entire existence, that mountain perfectly obeys the laws of gravity, of geology, of, basic physics.
It doesn't really have a choice.
Exactly. It doesn't rebel. It doesn't wake up one Tuesday and decide it wants to float. I mean, it has never once made a mistake. And now, look at us. Look at humanity.
That is quite the contrast.
It is. We stumble. We break things constantly. We wage these just catastrophic wars. We routinely ruin our own lives with, frankly, terrible decisions.
Yeah, daily.
Right. And yet, according to this really groundbreaking thesis we are exploring today, it is not the flawless, perfectly obedient mountain that holds the ultimate, cosmic VIP pass. It is us. The stumbling, failing, endlessly chaotic human beings.
It's wild to think about.
It really is. Have you ever wondered why a fragile creature that makes so many self-destructive mistakes is the only thing on Earth burdened with the ultimate responsibility of free will?
I mean, it is arguably the most profound paradox of the human condition. You look at that mountain, or you look through a telescope at the orbit of Jupiter, and you just see these entities existing in a state of perfect, uninterrupted obedience.
I'm just following the script.
Exactly. They're essentially locked in a strict physical determinism. And then you have us. We are staggering around in the dark, possessing this incredibly terrifying capability to reason, to choose, and most importantly, to fail completely.
Yeah, we have the capacity to build a hospital to heal total strangers.
Yeah.
And like the exact same biological species has the capacity to build a bomb to vaporize them.
Right. It's all wrapped up in the same package.
And today, we are going to explore a deeply fascinating, truly paradigm-shifting answer to why that is. We are taking a comprehensive deep dive into this brilliant thesis by Dr. Khaled Waleed. It's titled Udir Alamahu al-Bayan, which roughly translates to he taught him expression, or he taught him eloquence.
And it is essential to understand right out of the gate that Dr. Waleed is not just offering some, light philosophical musing here.
No, not at all.
This is a meticulously argued, incredibly dense textual thesis. I mean, he is pulling apart the very linguistic roots, the grammatical structures, and the mathematical matrices of the Quran to build a completely new architectural framework for understanding human consciousness and the whole purpose of our existence.
And what I find so fascinating about his work, and actually, just to be absolutely clear with you listening right now,
yeah,
we are treating his theories almost like a raw data set today.
Yes, very important point.
Right. As your guides on this deep dive, we are neutrally mapping his exact textual and structural arguments. We aren't, theologians taking a side or actively endorsing these views. We are simply tracing the incredible linguistic map that he has drawn from the source material.
Because the logic he uses to get there is just mind-bending.
It really is. We are just here to show you his math.
And to understand something as monumental as the purpose of human free will, Dr. Waleed argues that we can't just start with human history. We can't start with biology. We have to zoom way, way out.
Like pre-creation out.
Exactly. He says we have to look at how the universe's ultimate curriculum was designed long before the concept of humanity even existed.
Okay, so let's unpack that, because this brings us to Dr. Waleed's analysis of the opening of Surah Ar-Rahman, which, for those who don't know, is one of those famous chapters in the Quran. And he points out this structural secret that is just hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, it's right there in the first few lines.
Right, so the opening goes like this. First, the most merciful, Ar-Rahman.
Yeah.
Second, taught the Quran. Third, created man. And fourth, taught him al-Bayan, which is that eloquence, that ability to express and process.
So let's look really closely at that specific sequence. First, the teacher. Second, the teaching of the Quran. Third, the creation of man. Fourth, the teaching of Bayan.
Right.
For centuries, people have recited those verses sequentially, but Dr. Waleed stops the record right there and points out a massive chronological problem if you try to read it strictly as a human timeline.
Right, because if I'm reading that like a standard history book, it seems completely backward. I mean, how on earth can God teach the Quran in step 2 before he even creates the man who is supposed to read it in step 3?
It doesn't make logical sense as a timeline.
No, it's like saying I taught a brilliant master class to an empty room and then, I don't know, built the students a week later.
Exactly the trap. But Dr. Waleed emphasizes that this sequence is not chronological, it is causal.
Causal, meaning one causes the other regardless of time.
Right. It reveals the eternal architecture of divine knowledge. The divine knowledge, the Quran, is eternal. It existed as a blueprint, as the ultimate, unalterable code of truth, entirely independent of humanity.
Wow. Okay.
Man did not need to exist for the truth to be true. The truth came first. Man is simply the vessel that was subsequently engineered to receive it.
Okay, I want to try and map this to a modern analogy just to make sure I'm really wrapping my head around it.
Go for it.
It feels like a team of brilliant software engineers coding a flawless, incredibly complex operating system. That operating system, the code itself, is the Quran in this framework. It is written, it is perfect, and it exists on a server somewhere long before the hardware, the actual physical laptop, is ever manufactured in a factory.
That is a perfect parallel for what Dr. Waleed is describing. The code exists prior to the machine. Then in step 3 of the Surah, you build the hardware. You create man. But there is a massive catch here regarding that hardware.
Right, because if I just have a laptop fresh off the assembly line, but it has no screen and no keyboard, it's essentially just a very expensive paperweight.
Exactly.
It might have a super fast processor, but if there's no user interface, I can't interact with that flawless operating system. The code is useless to the machine.
And that user interface in Dr. Waleed's thesis is step 4, al-ban. Without that interface, the capacity for deep comprehension, critical reasoning, and eloquent expression, the eternal knowledge remains totally inaccessible to the hardware.
It's just locked away.
Completely. And here is where Dr. Waleed's linguistic analysis gets incredibly precise. He notes a very specific distinction in the Quranic text regarding the word used for man in this exact sequence.
Okay.
The text uses the Arabic word insan.
Not bashar, right.
Yeah.
Because I know those two get translated as man or human interchangeably all the time in English translations.
They do get translated interchangeably, but Dr. Waleed argues they are profoundly different. According to his analysis, insan refers specifically to the physical material creation.
The biology.
Yes, the flesh and bone, the carbon and water. It is the unbooted hardware. It does not carry the weight of consciousness. Bashar, however, denotes the elevated, conscious, fully accountable being, the one who actually carries the trust of free will.
Okay, so insan is just the biological shell. It's the laptop sitting on the desk, powered off.
Right.
But once you install al-ban, once you download that user interface into the hardware, you elevate this creature into bashar.
Yeah, precisely. You boot it up.
It makes me think of a school. You don't build a massive brick-and-mortar university just hoping some random person wanders by. You design the curriculum first, you write the textbooks,
Yes.
then you bring the student into the classroom, and finally you teach them how to read. That ability to read, to actually process the curriculum, is bayan.
It is the ultimate bridge. Dr. Waleed argues that bayan is the sole mechanism that makes the reception of divine knowledge possible. It connects the eternal creator with the temporal, physical creation. But this establishes a pretty terrifying baseline.
How so?
Well, if bayan is the processing interface, what exactly is the sheer weight of the data being downloaded into this human hardware? What is the actual burden of possessing this capability?
Which brings us right back to my question about the mountain.
Exactly.
Because Dr. Waleed directs our attention to the concept of the amana, which translates to the trust. And there's this incredibly awe-inspiring, almost cinematic sequence described in the Quran where this trust was offered to the heavens, to the earth, and to the mountains.
Right, this massive cosmic offer.
And they all refused it. They were literally terrified of it. But man stepped up and accepted it.
And we have to clearly define what this trust, this amana, actually is in Dr. Waleed's framework. He defines it not as some physical object like a glowing orb of light or a magic artifact, but as the crushing weight of free will.
Free will.
Yes. It is the burden of personal responsibility. It is the intellectual capacity to understand divine commands and the sovereign freedom to either obey them or, crucially, to violently reject them.
So when the mountains and the stars refused it, they weren't just being humble. They were recognizing they didn't have the hardware for it. They couldn't run the software.
Exactly. The mountains, the stars, the planets, they are programmed. They operate on fixed physical laws. They completely lack bayan. They cannot process a moral choice. They cannot choose to disobey gravity.
Right.
Man, however, steps up. Man has the intellect to distinguish right from wrong and the will to actually make a choice.
And this is where I always get completely hung up.
Why is that?
This is where I have to push back hard on how this is traditionally read, and honestly, why Dr. Waleed's thesis is so necessary for me. The famous Quranic verse describing this event says that man took on this trust and then immediately describes man as zaliman jahula.
Yes, that is the phrasing.
Historically, in almost every translation I've ever seen, this is read as an absolute insult. It translates to man being fundamentally unjust and ignorant.
That is the standard traditional reading, yes.
Right. And I read that and think, if I am a manager at a company, I do not give the nuclear launch codes or the master keys to the building to the employee I describe purely as unjust, evil, and ignorant.
It wouldn't be good management.
No. Why on earth would a perfect, all-knowing creator give the ultimate cosmic responsibility, the VIP access to free will, to a creature described in such fatalistic negative terms? It seems like a catastrophic management decision.
I completely understand that reaction, but if we connect this to the broader architecture of his argument, this is exactly where Dr. Waleed's reframing is so vital.
Okay, lay it on me.
He argues that this description, Zaluman Jahula, is not an absolute fatalistic insult. It is not a declaration that humans are inherently evil or doomed from the start. Rather, it is a highly precise diagnostic description of a learning state.
A learning state, like a prerequisite for education.
Precisely. Let's break down his linguistic analysis of these two specific words, starting with jahul. Often translated as ignorant, Dr. Waleed argues it essentially means starting from a blank slate.
A blank slate.
Yes. It means being brought into existence without pre-programmed knowledge. Think about the angels. They are created with instant, complete knowledge of their purpose. They just know.
So they don't need a user interface. They don't need beyond because there's nothing to process. It's just a direct command line. God says do it, they do it.
Exactly. But humans are jahul. We enter the world knowing absolutely nothing, which means we are in a state that absolutely requires us to ask questions. We have to seek out the teacher.
Oh, I see.
If we were created all-knowing, there would be no need for a curriculum, there would be no need for the Quran, and no need for the tool of bayan. Our blank slate is the very reason the interface is required in the first place.
Okay, I can buy jahul as a blank slate. That makes sense. But what about zalum? Because that translates to unjust or wronging oneself. How is doing wrong a required learning state?
Dr. Waleed interprets zalum as the reality of learning through trial and error.
Trial and error.
Yes. When you start with a blank slate, the only way to acquire experiential knowledge is to attempt, to fail, and to correct.
Oh, man. I totally see where this is going. Think about a toddler learning to walk.
Perfect example.
Right, the toddler starts off as completely jahul. They have an absolute blank slate when it comes to the physics of gravity. They don't know how balance works. They don't understand mass. And because they have that blank slate, what do?
They try to stand?
They try to stand and they stumble. They fall over. They scrape their knees. In a very literal physical sense, they are wronging their own bodies through trial and error. That perfectly aligns with zalum.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. And crucially, when you as an adult watch that toddler fall, you would never point at them and say, what an evil, unjust, hopelessly corrupt creature.
Right, I'd never say that. I would say they're in a state of development, they need a teacher, they need someone to hold their hand.
Exactly. It is a developmental phase. And this leads Dr. Waleed to establish a major unbreakable rule in his thesis. There can be no accountability without teaching.
No accountability without teaching.
And there can be no teaching without the tool of bayan. God does not punish the toddler for falling before teaching the toddler how to walk.
Wow.
The very fact that humans are zaluman jahula, blank slates prone to trial and error, is the precise reason they were given bayan. It is the bespoke tool designed specifically to move us from the darkness of ignorance into a state of enlightened free will.
This completely flips the script. We aren't cursed with ignorance. Our ignorance is the empty cup waiting to be filled by bayan.
Beautifully put.
So we have the hardware, the insan, we have the interface beyond, and we know we are in this developmental learning state where making mistakes is just part of the data gathering process. But let's get practical here.
Okay.
How does Dr. Waleed say we are actually supposed to use this tool? Like, how does this bayan operating system function in the real world to get us from point A to point B?
Well, Dr. Waleed outlines a brilliantly elegant three-dimensional system of signs, or ayat in Arabic, that man is required to read and process using this tool of bayan. Think of it as a three-tiered curriculum that escalates in complexity.
Okay, what's tier one?
The first tier is psychological, or internal signs.
Internal signs. So looking inward at ourselves.
Yes. Using your intellect to recognize your own physical weaknesses. Processing your psychological needs, your fears, your finite nature, your mortality. It is profound self-awareness.
Okay.
The second tier moves outward. These are the earthly or observable signs. This is looking at the intricate, perfectly calibrated order of nature, the ecosystems, the biology, the physics of the world around us.
Okay, I am totally with him on these two. I look inside, I realize how needy and fragile and emotionally complex I am. Then I look outside and I see how perfectly structured the ecosystem is, how the water cycle provides rain, how the sun provides energy for photosynthesis. That grounds me in reality.
It does.
But neither of those things actually proves a divine creator. It just proves that biology and psychology exist. So where does the actual theology come in? What is the third tier?
The third tier is the cosmic or unseen signs. This is the divine reality, the ultimate truth of the creator, the purpose of existence, and the afterlife.
Now, wait a minute. This is the massive leap, isn't it?
How do you mean?
I mean, how do we jump from what we can clearly see, my own anxiety, or a tree growing in my yard, to what we can't see, like an eternal afterlife or an invisible divine creator? Because honestly, without a strict mechanism, that just sounds like wishful thinking. How does Bayan bridge that gap without just falling into blind, unscientific delusion?
That is the crucial question, and it is exactly where Dr. Waleed's thesis gets highly analytical. He answers this by introducing the concept of sunan.
Sunan.
Yes, sunan translates to the constant, unbending divine laws of the universe. Dr. Waleed argues that because the underlying laws of the universe are fixed, mathematically precise, and universally applicable, we can reliably extrapolate from the visible to the invisible.
Extrapolate, so it's not a blind leap, it's a calculated projection.
Exactly. The observable world acts as a flawless mirror for the unobservable world, provided you use your buy-in to process the reflection. Dr. Waleed provides specific, observable examples to prove how this mechanism works. Let's look at the concept of resurrection, which to the human mind often seems impossible.
Right. When something is dead, it's dead. Biology stops.
But Dr. Waleed says, look at the earthly signs. Look at a dead, dry seed. You put it into the cold earth. To the naked eye, it is totally lifeless. It is just inert matter.
Yeah.
But then water and sunlight are introduced, and it springs to life as a complex green plant. That is an observable sunan, an observable law of revival in nature. Now you apply bayan, you use your intellect to mathematically extrapolate this observable law to the unseen concept of human resurrection.
Let me see if I follow the logic. I observe that the system has a built-in mechanism for reviving dead biological matter.
Yes.
Therefore, if the system can revive the dead seed, the creator of the system possesses the capability to revive the dead human. It's an analogy of scale, not a leap of faith.
Precisely. It is a logical deduction based on precedent, and he offers another incredibly powerful example regarding the concept of ultimate justice. We all observe, in the second tier of earthly signs, that terrible injustice often goes unpunished in this world.
Oh, all the time.
The brutal tyrant dies peacefully in his sleep. The innocent victim suffers endlessly.
Which is the primary reason a lot of people reject the idea of a just God in the first place. They look at the world and say, the math doesn't add up.
But Dr. Waleed says, look deeper into the sunan. Through our psychological signs, our innate outrage at unfairness, and through observing the physical order of the universe, we see a profound law of balance and consequence.
Right, like in physics.
Exactly. In physics, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In ecosystems, imbalances eventually correct themselves. The law of the universe is equilibrium. Therefore, using beyond, we logically deduce that because the universe demands balance, and balance is clearly not achieved in this mortal life, there must be an ultimate day of justice in the unseen realm to balance the cosmic scales.
Wow. It is essentially the scientific method applied to theology. You observe the data, you identify the constant law, and you hypothesize the unseen reality required to make the equation balance.
It is a profoundly logical framework.
And the linguistic brilliance that Dr. Waleed uncovered here just blew my mind when I read it in the source material. He points out that in the Quran, when the text talks about truth becoming clear, the Arabic word used is yatabayan.
Yes, yatabayan.
And yatabayan shares the exact same linguistic Arabic root as the word bayan.
It does.
The tool itself is literally woven into the result. You use bayan, the processing tool, so that the truth, yatabayan, becomes clear. The mechanics of the language are perfectly reflecting the mechanics of the philosophy.
It is a stunning linguistic symmetry. And this process, using the intellect to read the internal and external signs and extrapolating them through the constant laws to arrive at a certainty of the divine, this is the ideal state of humanity in Dr. Waleed's thesis.
This is how it's supposed to work.
Yes. This is man successfully carrying the trust. This is the hardware running the software perfectly, utilizing the UI exactly as intended.
But, as we know from turning on the news on literally any given day, the hardware glitches. A lot.
Constantly.
The software gets corrupted. What happens when the student is given this incredible tool of Bayan, placed in this perfect classroom of observable signs, and just willfully decides to throw the textbook out the window?
Well, that brings us to the dark side of the thesis.
Right, because Dr. Bayan introduces us to the dark mirror of Bayan, a truly terrifying concept that he calls insilak.
Yes. To understand insilak, we have to look at how Dr. Wilde focuses intensely on a very specific archetype found in Surah Al-Araf, verse 175.
Okay.
It recounts the story of someone who was explicitly given the divine signs, but instead of using them, he detached from them, was subsequently followed by Satan, and became one of the deviators.
Let's really dig into Dr. Waleed's linguistic breakdown of this word, insilak. Because when we say detached in English, it sounds passive. It sounds like a sticker that just lost its glue and fell off a notebook. But the root of this word is incredibly visceral.
It is violent. Dr. Waleed explains that the literal Arabic root of insilak means to strip off or to peel away skin. Imagine an animal being flayed. It is a violent, active, physical removal of something that is intimately biologically attached to you.
That is horrifying.
It is meant to be horrifying. And Dr. Waleed emphasizes a critical, often overlooked point here. This person in the verse was not ignorant. They were not in that blank slate state of johul.
They weren't a toddler learning to walk.
No. The verse explicitly says they were given the signs, they had the curriculum, they were metaphorically wearing the signs like a second skin, they had the tool of Bayan fully operational and downloaded, but they actively, willfully, and consciously stripped it off.
It's not a passive failure to learn. It is a premeditated destruction of your own intellectual and spiritual interface. You have the telescope that lets you see the stars, and you intentionally smash the lenses.
That's exactly it.
But why? Why would a human being, given the keys to understanding the entire universe, actively choose to skin themselves of that knowledge? What is the motivation to do that?
Dr. Waleed points to the very next verse for the psychological diagnosis. It says this person clung to the earth. The Arabic phrase is akhlada ila al-ard.
Clung to the earth.
Yes. Instead of using their bayan to read the earthly signs and elevate their consciousness toward the cosmic, the unseen, the divine, they took this incredible, massive processing power and aimed it entirely downward.
Downward into the material.
Exactly. They used their intellect solely to dominate the material world. They wanted to conquer the earth, to amass wealth, to manipulate nature and other humans for pure power. They short-circuited the system by making the physical world the ultimate goal, rather than just using it as a sign pointing to something higher.
They turned the telescope around and just obsessively stared at the dirt.
Yes.
And Dr. Waleed highlights a really striking, frankly pathetic metaphor that the text uses to describe the aftermath of this insilak. The text compares the one who detached to a panting dog. And Dr. Waleed breaks down exactly why a dog is used here. And it ties perfectly back to Bayan.
It is a brilliant textual connection. Think about it. What is the defining feature of the dog in this specific metaphor?
It pants, with its tongue hanging out.
Yeah.
And a tongue is literally an instrument of expression. It is a physical tool of Bayan. But what does the dog actually do with it?
It just pants.
Right. If it is burdened and exhausted, chasing something down, it pants. If it is left completely alone, resting in the shade with everything it needs, it still just pants.
Exactly. It has the instrument of expression, but it is completely hopelessly detached from any higher meaning or purpose. It is driven purely by physical state and appetite. Dr. Waleed argues that this is the ultimate tragedy of insilak.
To just be reduced to appetite.
Yes. Without using Bayan for its true elevated purpose, which is discovering the unseen through the seen, humans don't just stagnate, they regress. They actively devolve back to the level of the animals or the inanimate objects that refused the trust in the very beginning. They become creatures of pure instinct, driven by appetite and material survival, completely losing the elevated status of Bashar.
They turn themselves back into mere insan, just biology.
Just hardware.
So we have this terrifying concept of insilak, the willful peeling away of divine intellect to violently conquer the material world. But who exactly represents this ultimate failure in the text? Like, who is the archetype of insilak?
Well, this is where Dr. Khaled Waleed introduces his most startling structural discovery. It is a literal mathematical lock that he claims to have found hidden deep within the text of the Quran.
Okay, listener, whoa. Stop right there and buckle in.
It gets deep here.
Because this is the part of Dr. Waleed's thesis that is going to make anyone who has ever studied Abrahamic theology fall out of their chair. We are about to cross into a massive departure from thousands of years of traditional historical interpretations. The standard historical view is that the name Israel is merely a secondary title for the prophet Jacob, who is known as Yaqub in Arabic.
That is the universally accepted tradition, yes. Everyone assumes they're the same person.
But Dr. Waleed argues otherwise. And again, I must explicitly remind you listening that we are neutrally reporting his textual and structural analysis here. We're going to trace exactly how he arrived at this unique rereading of historical lineage based strictly on his linguistic mapping of the scripture. We aren't theologians pushing a narrative, we are showing you his math, because the burden of proof he sets for himself is incredibly high.
And his math is utterly fascinating. Let's walk through his evidence step by step, because it really builds on itself. First, Dr. Waleed establishes a firm linguistic rule that he observes consistently applied throughout the Quran: the strict distinction between a biological parent, the Walid, and an ideological or educational father, the Ab.
Okay, Waleed versus Ab, biology versus ideology.
Exactly. Dr. Waleed notes that biological lineage, the Walid, does not guarantee ideological lineage, the Ab. You can be the biological son of a prophet and still reject their path entirely.
Right, like Noah's son, who drowned in the flood because he rejected his father's message. Noah was his Walid, his biological father, but clearly Noah was not his Ab, his ideological guide, because the son chose a completely different path.
Precisely. And conversely, you can have an ideological father, an Ab, whose path you follow devoutly, even if you share zero blood relation. With that strict grammatical rule in place, Dr. Waleed takes us to Surah Maryam, verse 58.
Okay.
This verse explicitly lists the categories of prophets upon whom God bestowed favor.
Okay, let's look at the verse.
It reads, "From the seed of Adam, and those we carried with Noah, and the seed of Abraham and Israel."
And Israel.
Dr. Waleed zeroes in on that single conjunction, the word and. In Arabic grammar, the conjunction wa denotes separation and distinction between two distinct entities.
Let me follow this logic. If Israel were simply a nickname or an alternate title for the prophet Jacob, he would already be automatically included under the umbrella of the seed of Abraham, since biologically, Jacob is Abraham's grandson.
Exactly. If they were the same, the and would be totally redundant. But because the text explicitly separates them, saying the seed of Abraham and Israel, Dr. Waleed argues the grammar forces them into two completely separate, distinct lineages.
Okay, that is a compelling grammatical clue. But surely one and isn't enough to overturn centuries of history.
It isn't, which is why Dr. Waleed introduces what he calls the Wattlew matrix, which is where the mathematical lock truly clicks into place.
The Wattlew matrix.
Yes. Wattlew translates to the command, recite upon them. Throughout the vast text of the Quran, there are 4 specific, highly emphasized, distinct commands to recite a particular story or archetype to the people.
Hold on, let me get this straight. You're saying there's a literal mathematical map here. What are the 4 specific recite commands?
The 4 commands to recite are, first, the story of the 2 sons of Adam; second, the story of Noah; third, the story of Abraham;
Okay.
and fourth, the story of the one who was given the signs but detached from them, the story of Insilak from Surah Al-Araf.
Okay, so Adam, Noah, Abraham, and the detached one.
Now, watch how Dr. Waleed maps these 4 recite commands directly against the 4 distinct categories of prophets we just read in Surah Maryam 58.
Oh, this is going to be wild.
Number 1. The seed of Adam and Maryam perfectly matches the command to recite the story of the sons of Adam.
Check.
Number 2. Those carried with Noah perfectly matches the command to recite the story of Noah.
Check.
Number 3. The seed of Abraham perfectly matches the command to recite the story of Abraham.
Check. Which leaves only one category left in Maryam 58 and only one recite command left.
Exactly. By rigorous structural logic and a mathematical process of elimination, the 4th category in Maryam 58 Israel must perfectly map to the 4th command to recite,
which is the story of the one who detached, the one who committed insilak.
Wow.
So by overlaying these 2 textual matrices, Dr. Waleed concludes that the figure of Israel in the Quranic text is not the righteous prophet Jacob. Rather, Israel is an ancient, entirely distinct entity who committed the ultimate act of insilak, the one who was given the signs and willfully stripped them off to cling to the earth.
That is exactly his thesis. He argues that Israel represents an ancient archetype of humanity that fundamentally failed the test of Bayan. Meanwhile, Jacob remains a righteous prophet, firmly nestled within the pristine, separate ideological lineage of Abraham.
That is a staggering rereading of the text. It fundamentally changes how you view the entire cast of characters. But if this ancient entity, Israel, represents the archetype of Insilak, what exactly did he do?
What was the crime?
Yeah. What was the specific historical crime that stripped away his signs and reduced him to the metaphor of the panting dog? Because it can't just be a minor infraction.
To answer that, Dr. Waleed unpacks how the Quran specifically defines the primary act of insilak committed by this figure. He points us to Surah Al-Imran, verse 93.
Okay.
This verse clearly states that Israel forbade certain foods or things upon himself before the Torah was even revealed.
Wait. Forbade foods. On the surface, deciding not to eat something doesn't sound like a cosmic crime that dooms your spiritual lineage. People go on diets all the time. People have allergies. Why is this specific act of self-restriction so catastrophic in Dr. Waleed's framework?
Because, Dr. Waleed explains, it is not about the food, it is about authority.
Authority.
Declaring things definitively lawful or unlawful, creating a moral legislative framework without divine authority, is the ultimate form of legislative overreach. It is a human being playing God. Think back to the system of Bayan. It is designed for man to use his intellect to wait for, process, and execute divine signs.
Right. The curriculum comes from the teacher.
But this entity, Israel, decided he didn't need to wait for the complete revelation. He didn't wait for the Torah. He used his intellect not to seek the unseen teacher, but to write his own rules. He elevated his own personal desires, aversions, and opinions to the absolute level of divine law.
Ah, I see it now. It is the ultimate intellectual arrogance. It's like the laptop hardware deciding it's going to write its own operating system while it's only halfway through the download from the server.
Exactly.
It is making absolute moral decisions before the bayan, the divine teaching, is actually complete. He took the magnificent tool of intellect and used it to actively sever the connection to the teacher, declaring his own mind as the ultimate authority.
Exactly. He assumed the role of the creator.
Yeah.
And Dr. Waleed argues that this specific act of self-legislation is the genesis of an entire ideological lineage. When the Quran speaks of the children of Israel in a negative context, Dr. Waleed suggests it is speaking of ideological descendants, not necessarily biological ones.
So a school of thought.
Yes. It is referring to a millah, a path, a methodology, a way of thinking that inherited this specific disease of insilak.
And what are the symptoms of that ideological disease, according to his textual reading? If you are on this millah of insilak, what does your behavior look like?
According to Dr. Waleed's analysis, this lineage is characterized by exactly what you'd expect from a group that believes their own intellect is superior to divine law. They hide the truth when it doesn't suit their material interests. They actively alter the words of Scripture to fit their current desires.
Right.
They break covenants because they don't feel bound by anything higher than themselves. And ultimately, they display an obsession with material domination, clinging to the earth at the total expense of spiritual elevation.
That paints a very stark, very dangerous picture of what happens when bayan is weaponized for ego. But Dr. Waleed doesn't just leave us in the dark with this terrifying archetype. He contrasts this lineage of insilak deeply and deliberately with his analysis of the prophet Abraham, or Ibrahim.
Yes.
Abraham serves as the ultimate antidote in this structural framework.
Yes. The contrast Dr. Waleed draws is absolute. It is light and day. Let's look at the two figures side by side, where the one who detached the Israel archetype arrogantly rushed to forbid things upon himself before the revelation was complete. Abraham is described in the text in the exact opposite terms.
How sad.
He is described as one who completed the words.
Completed the words, meaning he waited for the full download.
He waited, he listened, and he fulfilled the divine commands perfectly without adding a single ounce of his own ego or his own amendments to the mix. He let the teacher finish the lesson.
And where the detached one followed his own material desires and clung to the earth, Abraham did the exact opposite. When he was told by the divine to submit, the text says he surrendered entirely. He didn't try to lawyer his way out of it. He didn't try to rewrite the rules to make them more comfortable.
No, he submitted.
Right. He used his bayan, his intellect, to realize that the highest, most logical conclusion of observing the universe is perfect submission to its creator.
Abraham represents the flawless execution of the amana, the trust. He didn't strip off the signs, he internalized them completely. Dr. Waleed points out that the true millah, or path of Abraham, which the Quran explicitly commands people to follow, is fundamentally about epistemic humility.
Epistemic humility. Knowing the limits of what you know.
Precisely. It is recognizing the inherent limits of human intellect. It is using Mammon to relentlessly seek divine clarity, rather than arrogantly assuming we have the capacity or the right to write the moral code of the universe ourselves.
So we have mapped this incredibly dense, fascinating architectural structure that Dr. Waleed has drawn. We started with the unbooted hardware of our creation, the insan. We saw the software, the eternal word, the Quran. We explored the interface of Bayan that brings it all online.
Right.
We looked at the trust, the trial and error of the learning state. We mapped the 3 tiers of signs. And we stared into the abyss of Insalak, contrasting it with the humble submission of Abraham. What is the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, sitting in your car or making dinner right now?
If we synthesize Dr. Khaled Waleed's grand thesis, it comes down to a clear mission statement for human existence. God gave us the physical interface, our bodies. He provided the ultimate eternal software, the divine truth. And crucially, he installed the processing tool, Al-Bayan.
The UI.
Yes. Our entire existence, the test of the Amana, is to consciously use our free will to process the observable signs in our own psychology and in the natural world, and to use that data to bridge the gap and discover the unseen reality of the Creator.
And the ultimate failure condition is Insalak. It is having all of that incredible equipment, all of that cosmic potential, and using it just to conquer the dirt beneath our feet. To rewrite the rules of morality to suit our own fleeting appetites, essentially trying to become gods of our own tiny, fragile material domains while spiritually devolving into panting animals.
Exactly. The path of Abraham is the path of elevating the soul through Bayan. The path of the archetype Dr. Waleed identifies as Israel is the path of descending into the earth through Insalak.
It is a profound, incredibly challenging framework. And as we wrap up this deep dive into Dr. Waleed's work, I want to build on his thesis for a moment and take it somewhere completely new for you to ponder as you go about your day.
Let's hear it.
We live in an era right now that is defined by the explosive, rapid advancement of technology. And more than ever before in human history, we are constantly, voluntarily outsourcing our reasoning. We are quite literally outsourcing our bayan to external tools.
It is a profound and arguably dangerous shift in how humans interact with knowledge.
Think about it. We outsource our memory to search engines. We don't remember facts, we just remember how to Google them. We outsource our decision-making and our preferences to algorithms. And increasingly, we're asking artificial intelligence to process the complex signs of the world for us.
We really are.
We are asking machines to tell us what is true, what is false, and how we should act.
We are asking the hardware we built to do the processing that was uniquely assigned to us.
Exactly. So here is the provocative question I want to leave you with. If Dr. Waleed is right, and Bayan is the very essence of our divine trust, if it is the core interface that makes human free will meaningful and connects us to the divine, does our eager outsourcing of our intellect to technology risk a modern digital form of Insalak?
Wow.
By willingly asking machines to do our reasoning, are we slowly, comfortably stripping ourselves of the very tool that elevates us above the programmed mountains? Are we peeling away the very thing that makes us human?
That is a haunting and vital question to consider as we navigate this modern age. If we lose our bayan, we lose our connection to the teacher.
It brings us right back to where we started. We are the only creatures burdened with the terror and the glory of free will. How we use our bayan to carry that burden is the ultimate test. We want to deeply thank you for joining us on this rigorous journey through Dr. Khaled Waleed's profound and challenging thesis. Keep questioning the world around you, keep looking closely at the signs, and above all, keep using your bayan.